All right, so right now I'm going to be mapping out what it takes to start a business ecosystem with some initial metadata. To sketch it out, just mapping out how to find the very center point of a page, so you figure out the center point left to right at the top and bottom of the page, draw a vertical line, and then you're going to do the same for finding the vertical midpoint. The point of finding this center point is all based around the singularity. So when you think about the origin of the universe, and you think about how everything got started, it all started from a single point. And often that is represented in a lot of different spiritual beliefs, a lot of different religions, as a singular point that is surrounded by a circle. So that's what I'm doing here. Within the OS3 framework, this is associated with 0.9.0 own data, like ownership. So this central circle around a central point is about the data that it takes to create an ecosystem. And this metadata is going to be everything that we create after this grows out from this central point. A little added context. One thing I always do whenever I'm trying to draw these, I have it set at this point, but the way to find the diameter for that central circle is to again measure the shortest distance. So if you're drawing it and the page is shorter width-wise or shorter height-wise, whichever way is shorter, measure that distance, divide it by 5, and that will be the overall diameter of what you create for the circle. And with that being said, when you are drawing it with your compass, it should be half of that. So the radius should be 1/10 of the width of the page. I'm going to create documentation and stuff for this later, but I think it's just good to explain. What I'm doing here now is just drawing the quadrants that are created by that central point. And I'm just showing how I've been listening to the Astral Doorway series on the chakras. And within that, it talks about how when your chakras are rotating in the proper direction, they're rotating clockwise within your body. At this point, this is Groove 9, my journal. And again, since this is associated with data ownership, this is also associated with application programming interfaces, APIs. Again, another thing that I'm going to dive into a lot more. But with this metadata, what we're starting off with is Groove 9, verse 3, programming. So that's the P in API. The first metadata item is OS3 PI. So the OS3 is Our Story Open Source Operating System, and PI stands for Programming Interface. So this is the programming interface for OS3, and it's followed by an underscore in yoga, because this is the one common thread that you'll keep seeing, is that this aspect of what we're doing, it's really all associated with yoga, like inner engineering. So if we can learn about our inner engineering, how can we translate that to our external engineering? And Groove 9 verse 3 programming is about what we're going to be encoding and how we're going to be sharing this information. So OS3 PI yoga, in this step, it's about defining what the ownership and the licensing rights are. So for OS3, by default, it's the GNU GPL license version 3. The next step, 144 Phi PI, and this is the feminine aspect of like the Kundalini you can think of. And this is meant to be more public focused, so it's kind of open and accessible to everyone, like feminine energy. And within this, we're saying, what are we programming? What do we want to improve? What do we want to program within the ecosystem here? So it's groundwater, and what we're using as a programming guidelines are the 7 universal laws. For 369 MyPI, this is the community cord, COCH, and this is privatized. So this is for an individual, how they're going to be their own chief executive officer. And the guiding principle for them is the Tao Te Ching. Finally, 432 RPI, this is pop-up protocol and partnerships. This is related to how we're going to be re-encoding and programming the language institution guided by the Rwandan Vision 2050. Of all governments that I can think of, this is the only one, I'm sure all of them have one, this is the one that has something that is really clear. By 2050, our government is working towards this, and all of our companies can kind of follow suit. America goes back and forth all the time. So as far as what I'm doing with OS3, with Hue 3 in particular, I'm going to want to be following suit with how Rwanda does this. So, I mean, they're going to have specific targets, but as I do this, I'm going to remix this so that it makes sense for what I'm doing. So, Groove 9, verse 3 programming. How are you going to be licensing the information that you create? What are the 3 aspects related to nature, related to like your own individual role, and related to our institutions? What are you going to be encoding, and what are the guidelines? Moving up to quadrant 2, this is Groove 9. I screwed that up. Groove 9, verse 2, interface. So again, application programming interface. The interface is the midpoint. So interface is right in the middle here. OS3PI yoga. For this, we're just saying, okay, what are we going to be using as the basis of design? What's the interface that we're using to encode our business ecosystem? And in this case, it is OS3. I've already said it, but OS3 stands for Our Story Open Source Operating System. So at the basis of all of this overall protocol is a storytelling protocol. Mythologies, how we tell stories, it's the most powerful thing that the human species has. I mean, even though people are exceedingly scientifically driven, which I love science, but I think it's important to know that anything that was created in science, anything that was pursued within science, it started with a story that inspired someone. It started with a vision that got someone excited about doing something. If you decide to use OS3, you'll have the freedom to decide what do you call it for yourself. So within Q3, we call Our Story Everything is Music. That's what OS3 is called from our perspective, but literally you can call it whatever you want. It's open source, even the title is. So that's the first metadata item. The second is 144 5PI. This is the MAMA protocol, and again, this is going to be a consistent trend that you see over and over. With this, you decide what is the business ecosystem, and what do you really call the organization. With Q3, we call it business ecosystems. You might call it just a business. You might call it an organization. With that first item, you'll get to decide. And then underneath that, you say what the name of your organization or business ecosystem is. In this case, it's Q3. We are all right. Many, many meanings to that. And we'll get into that later. The next item, 369 MyPI community cord. This is where you program your team. What do you call your teams? Is it your groups? Is it your cohorts? Is it your guilds? Whatever you want. Within Hue 3, we call it a team, so that's why I wrote team there. The specific team that I'm working on right now, that's related to, if you think to the last step in programming, the team that's going to be programming the Chief Executive Officer of Hue 3 is called LP0 Polymath Process. Going to 432 RPI, this is the Papa protocol, the masculine aspect of things. And again, within this, it's the project, and within this, the project associated with the language institution is EP0 DAO teaching. Moving on back to the first quadrant, this is Groove 9 verse 1 application. Again, I said it's application, programming, interface. We started with the programming. What are we programming? We're programming our groundwater with the 7 universal laws. We're programming what a chief executive officer is with the Tao Te Ching. We're programming what our language institution is with the Rwanda Vision 2050. And then we got a little bit clearer about the interface, about how we're actually making that happen, and the designation that we're using within Hue 3, what we're calling our organization, what we're calling the groups of people, we're calling them teams, and then the actual names for those, and the project as well. At the application level, here at Groove 9 verse 1 application, this is all about showing the basis of design. This is getting into biomimicry. So as we work through all this, what is the actual application for all of this? So as we improve our organizations, we want to learn more about our eukaryotic cells. So our story open source operating system underneath this OS3 PI yoga, the basis of design is eukaryotic cells. And on this phase, since we're thinking about our language institution, since we're thinking about CEO, how do we represent that? You get to decide, how do you represent that within your organization? And the default is the cell membrane. Next, 144 5PI, the mama protocol of all this. You get to choose the ecosystem that you're working within. So are you working within the planet, like Hue 3 decided here? Are you working within your city, your country, your continent, your hemisphere, or the entire universe? You get to choose, and then within that you define what the limiting factor is. So within the planet, the limiting factor is the atmosphere. 369 MyPI, community chord. This is how you choose how individuals, what is the basis of design for individuals? So biomimicry, as we think about how individuals operate, we're going to be using a human. And then the limiting factor for a human, similar to the atmosphere for a planet, is the integumentary system, so the skin. And then finally, 432 RPI, this is the basis of design that we're using for our projects, the basis of design that we're using for our institutions. Within Hue 3, we represent our institutions as trees. So if we want to improve our institutions, we're going to be learning about trees, the systems that they operate within, and then we think the limiting factor of trees are water. That's just how we're designating it for Hue 3. Finally, we have the initial quadrant. This is Groove 9 verse 0 chord. Every single groove, Groove 9 through Groove 0, as you'll see as we go through this, they're always going to be, the 0 verse for those is always going to be chord. This one's pretty simple. So OS3 PI yoga. This is Sushumna. That's the central channel that runs up from the base of your spine all the way up through, goes into your brain. And that's the underlying chord that is taking us throughout this entire process as you code your business ecosystem. And then for each of these, you'll see whatever groove it is, that's going to be the chakra that's associated with where you are within Sushumna. 144 5PI, Mama protocol. And this is really just an introduction to everything. So within this is the open source aspect of the RStory open source operating system. And then as you'll see, the other two aspects here are the other two aspects of that title. So 369 MyPI community cord. Again, this is the individual aspect. This is the team. This is how we're figuring out the human. And with this, so we want you as an individual, you want your teams to have full control and full privacy over how your operating system operates. Finally, you have 432 RPI, the Papa Protocol. And this is the partnerships. These are the institutions that you're creating. These are the projects you're creating. And again, this is how we have tree systems. So this is that's our story. This is the map that we created over the last couple of days, showing the overall process. And this is just one aspect of the overall thing. So we have 10 more steps to go through. This is the first step, and we're excited to keep this going.